After my surgery, none of my children visited, except one quick call from my youngest saying, "Mom, we're busy. We'll check on you next month." I didn't complain. A week later, my lawyer called. "Ma'am, your daughter and her husband are requesting an early access to the inheritance for urgent expenses. Should we approve it?" I exhaled deeply and said, "Not yet," I whispered into the phone. My lawyer, David Brennan, paused on the other end. I could hear him shifting papers, probably adjusting his glasses the way he always did when something didn't sit right with him. "Mrs. Wilson, are you sure? Your daughter mentioned medical bills for her son. She sounded quite distressed." I looked down at my own surgical scar, still tender beneath the cotton hospital gown they'd sent me home in. The incision ran 6 inches across my abdomen, a hysterectomy that had knocked me flat for the past week. I was 65 years old, lying in a bed I'd made myself that morning because no one else was there to help. "Tell her we'll discuss it next month," I said, "when she comes to check on me, like she promised." After I hung up, the silence in my house felt heavier than usual. My name is Janet Wilson. I'm 65 years old, and until last week, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was a mother of 3, a widow of 8 years, and a woman who'd spent 4 decades building a life that meant something. My husband, William, had left me comfortable when he passed, not wealthy, but secure. We'd owned a small chain of hardware stores across Pennsylvania, the kind of honest business that served communities and built relationships. When William died of a heart attack at 59, I kept the business running for another 6 years before selling it to a regional company. The sale had been good, very good. I'd always been careful with money, the way my own mother taught me. "Save for the rainy days, Janet," she'd say, "and make sure your children never have to struggle the way we did." So I did. I saved. I invested wisely. I set up trusts and college funds. When my daughter Melissa needed help with her down payment, I gave it. When my son Trevor wanted to start his landscaping business, I funded it. When my youngest Natalie got divorced and needed to get back on her feet, I paid for her apartment for 6 months. I never asked for anything back. That's what mothers do, right? But last Tuesday, when I woke up from surgery with my mouth dry and my body feeling like it had been torn apart and stitched back together, I'd expected to see at least one of them in that recovery room. The nurse had smiled at me sympathetically. "No family yet, hun?" "They're coming," I'd said. "They're just busy." They didn't come that day, or the next, or the day after that. On Thursday, Natalie called. My youngest, 32, bright-eyed, always my baby. Her voice was rushed, distracted. "Mom, hey, I'm so sorry I haven't been able to get over there. Work has been insane, and Tyler has soccer, and you know how it is. How are you feeling?" "I'm managing," I'd said, even though I'd spent 20 minutes that morning trying to get out of bed without screaming. "That's great. Look, we'll definitely come check on you next month, okay? Things should calm down by then. Love you." She'd hung up before I could respond. Trevor sent a text. "Glad surgery went well, Mom. Swamped with spring contracts. We'll visit soon." Melissa didn't reach out at all. I told myself they were busy. People have lives. I couldn't expect them to drop everything just because I'd had surgery. I was being selfish, probably needy. All those things I'd promised myself I'd never become. Then David called about the inheritance request. I sat in my kitchen that evening, a mug of chamomile tea cooling in my hands, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was more like a tiny fissure in the foundation of what I'd believed to be true. A small crack that whispered, "Pay attention." The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I opened my late husband's old filing cabinet, the one in the basement office that still smelled faintly of his cologne and pipe tobacco. William had been meticulous about records. Every financial document, every will revision, every trust amendment was labeled and organized in those drawers. I pulled out the folder marked Estate Planning Current. Inside were copies of documents I'd signed over the years, the trust agreements, the will, the inheritance distributions. I'd always handled these things through David, never really examining the fine print. I trusted him. I trusted my children. But something Melissa had said to David nagged at me. Urgent medical expenses for her son. My grandson, Connor, was 12. A healthy, rambunctious kid who played baseball and ate me out of house and home every time he visited. What medical expenses? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our family text thread. The last message was from 3 weeks ago. A photo Melissa had shared of Connor at his baseball game, grinning in his uniform. The caption read, "Another win. This kid is unstoppable. No mention of illness. No mention of doctors or hospitals or anything urgent." I set the phone down slowly. That crack in the foundation? It just got wider. Over the next 2 days, I did something that felt both shameful and necessary. I started paying attention. I checked the trust documents more carefully. My estate was divided equally among my 3 children upon my death, but I'd also set up provisions for hardship withdrawals during my lifetime, emergencies that required immediate funding, medical crises, job loss, catastrophic events. The clause was there because I'd always wanted my children to know I'd be there for them if life got hard. But the clause required documentation, medical bills, proof of hardship. David would have asked for those. He was thorough, which meant either Melissa had provided fake documents, or what? I called Connor's school on Wednesday afternoon, pretending I wanted to send him a care package. The secretary was chipper and helpful. "Oh, Connor's doing wonderfully, Mrs. Wilson. Perfect attendance this quarter, actually. Such a great kid." "No illnesses?" I asked, keeping my tone light. His mother mentioned he'd been under the weather. "Not that I've heard. He was here yesterday, happy as a clam." I thanked her and hung up. The crack became a chasm. That evening, I did something else I'd never done before. I logged into the shared family photo account that Melissa had set up years ago. She'd wanted one place where we could all upload pictures, share memories. I rarely looked at it. Technology wasn't my strong suit, but I remembered the password she'd given me. I scrolled through recent uploads. There was Connor at baseball, Connor at a birthday party, Melissa and her husband Paul at what looked like a nice restaurant. She was wearing a dress I didn't recognize, something expensive. Paul had his arm around her, both of them smiling at the camera with wine glasses raised. The date stamp was from 4 days ago, 2 days after my surgery. I zoomed in on the background. The restaurant had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city skyline. Not our small town in Pennsylvania. Somewhere bigger. I could make out part of a sign reflected in the glass. "Gee." Still in. I grabbed my laptop and searched. Castle Inn Restaurant, Pennsylvania. Nothing. Castle Inn Restaurant. The top result was in Philadelphia, a 4-star establishment known for its $200 per person tasting menu. My daughter, who needed urgent money for medical expenses, had been at a $200 per person restaurant while I was recovering alone from surgery. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. The moon cast shadows across the table where William and I used to sit every morning with our coffee, where we'd made plans and dreamed small, careful dreams, where he'd held my hand 2 weeks before he died and said, "You've been the best thing in my life, Janet. Make sure the kids know how much we love them." I'd kept that promise. I'd loved them fiercely, unconditionally, the way parents do. But sitting there in the dark, I realized something that made my chest tighten. I didn't know if they loved me back. Not really. Not in the way that shows up when it matters. I thought about calling Melissa, confronting her, asking her why she'd lied. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear of what I'd hear. Or maybe, and this was the thought that kept me awake until dawn, maybe it was because some part of me already knew the answer and I wasn't ready to hear it spoken out loud yet. Instead, I made a decision. I called David the next morning. "I want to review all hardship withdrawal requests from the past 5 years," I said. "Every single one, and I want copies of the supporting documentation." He hesitated. "Janet, is everything all right?" "Just being thorough," I said. "Can you have them ready by Monday?" "Of course, I'll prepare everything." After I hung up, I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked older than 65. Tired. The surgical pain was fading, But something else had taken its place. A different kind of ache, deeper and harder to name. I touched my reflection, my fingertips meeting the cool glass. "Who are you?" I whispered. But I already knew. I was a woman who was about to discover something she didn't want to know, and there was no turning back now. Monday morning arrived with rain, the kind that taps against windows like impatient fingers. I'd spent the weekend moving carefully through my house, doing small tasks that kept my mind occupied. Laundry, dishes, watering the plants William had loved. Normal things that felt increasingly abnormal as that chasm in my chest widened. David's office was downtown, in one of those old brick buildings that had been retrofitted with modern interiors but kept their historical charm. I'd called an Uber, driving still hurt too much, and arrived at 9 o'clock sharp. His secretary, Margaret, smiled warmly when I walked in. "Janet, how are you feeling? David mentioned you'd had surgery." "Better each day," I lied. David emerged from his office, concern etched across his face. He was 58, silver-haired, the kind of lawyer who still wore three-piece suits and kept hard candy in a dish on his desk. He'd been William's friend before he became our lawyer, and I'd always trusted him completely. "Please, come in. I have everything ready." The conference room table was covered with manila folders, each labeled with dates and names. David had been thorough. "I pulled every hardship request since William passed," he said, settling into a chair across from me. "There have been 7 total, 3 from Melissa, 2 from Trevor, 2 from Natalie." 7. In 8 years, my children had requested emergency funds 7 times. "Walk me through them," I said. David opened the first folder. Melissa, January 2018, request for $15,000. Medical expenses for Connor. He'd apparently broken his arm badly and needed surgery. I remembered that. Connor had been 6. Melissa had called me crying, saying the insurance wouldn't cover everything. I'd approved it immediately. "Documentation?" I asked. David slid over a hospital bill. It looked legitimate. Connor's name, the date, detailed charges totaling $14,847. But something tickled at my memory. "May I see that?" I studied the bill more carefully. The hospital name was correct. St. Mary's Regional. But the doctor's name, Dr. Patricia Hendricks. I knew all of Connor's doctors. His pediatrician was Dr. James Yoon. When he'd broken his arm, he'd been treated by Dr. Sarah Chen at the orthopedic clinic. "David, can you look up Dr. Patricia Hendricks at St. Mary's?" He pulled out his laptop and typed. His expression shifted. "There's no Dr. Hendricks listed in their directory, not in orthopedics, not in any department." The room suddenly felt colder. "Next one," I said quietly. David opened the second folder, but I already knew what we'd find. Trevor's request from March 2019, $22,000 for equipment for his landscaping business after a warehouse fire. I remembered that too. He'd sounded devastated on the phone. "I pulled the fire department records," David said, his voice tight. "No reported fires at any warehouse connected to Trevor's business. No insurance claims filed." My hands started shaking. I clasped them together in my lap. "Keep going!" Folder after folder, request after request, each one a carefully constructed lie. Natalie's divorce expenses, but court records showed her divorce had been finalized 6 months before she claimed to need money for legal fees. Melissa's emergency roof repair, but property records showed no permits pulled, no work done. Trevor's medical bills for his daughter. But his daughter Sophia had been perfectly healthy, according to her school attendance records David had subpoenaed. By the time we finished, I felt like I was watching my life from outside my body, like I was floating somewhere near the ceiling, looking down at this foolish old woman who'd believed every word her children told her. "Janet," David said gently, "the total amount withdrawn under false pretenses is approximately $127,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $127,000, stolen, because that's what it was, not borrowed, not requested in good faith, stolen. The current request from Melissa, David continued, is for $35,000. She's provided medical bills again, this time claiming Connor needs treatment for a heart condition. He paused. Should I verify these? Yes, I whispered. Verify everything. He nodded. There's something else you should know. Last month, Trevor called me asking about the trust structure. He wanted to know if there was any way to access his inheritance early, before you passed away. He said you'd been talking about revising your will to give them more control. I stared at him. I never said anything like that. I know. That's why I didn't pursue it. But Janet, he leaned forward. I think you need to consider the possibility that this is coordinated, that they're working together. The words hung in the air between us. Working together, against me, my children. I stood up abruptly, pain shooting through my abdomen. I need to go. Janet, wait. I need air. I made it to the hallway before the tears came. Margaret looked up from her desk, alarmed, but I held up a hand and kept walking. Down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the rain. The Uber driver who picked me up didn't ask why I was crying. He just handed me tissues and drove in silence, which made me cry harder. Back home, I did what I should have done weeks ago. I started really looking. I went through my phone records first. Calls from my children over the past year were sparse, maybe once every 2 weeks from Melissa, even less from Trevor and Natalie. But texts were more frequent. I read through them with new eyes. Hey, Mom, can you send me Aunt Carol's soup recipe? Mom, what was Dad's favorite song again? Quick question. Did Dad have a coin collection? Questions about William, about his possessions, about family heirlooms. I opened my laptop and checked my email. I'd given all 3 of them access to my calendar years ago, so they'd know when I had doctor's appointments or social events. I pulled up the access logs. Trevor had accessed my calendar 43 times in the past month alone. Why would he need to check my calendar 43 times? Unless he wasn't just checking, unless he was monitoring. I thought about the surgery, how I'd put it on my calendar, weeks in advance, how all 3 of them would have seen it, would have known the exact date and time, and not one of them had come. My hands trembled as I navigated to my financial accounts. Everything was password protected, secure. But I'd written down all my passwords in a leather journal I kept in my desk drawer. William had always insisted on having physical backups. Technology fails, he'd say. Paper endures. I pulled open the drawer. The journal was there, but it wasn't where I'd left it. I always kept it spine up, easy to grab. Now it was lying flat, slightly askew. Someone had been in this drawer. I flipped through the pages. All my passwords were there, written in my careful handwriting. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, insurance policies, the estate trust portal. My heart hammering, I logged into the trust account. There was a section for authorized users, people who could view account information but not make withdrawals without my approval and David's co-signature. I'd added Melissa years ago when she'd offered to help me organize my finances after William died. I'd thought it was sweet, helpful. The access logs showed she'd logged in 6 times in the past week, while I was recovering from surgery. She'd viewed the full trust balance, the investment breakdown, the property deeds, the insurance policies, everything. I pulled up the email function and saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a draft message in the outbox, unsent, dated 3 days ago. To Trevor. Wilson, Neen82, email.com. Natalie, Patterson at email.com. From Melissa, Thompson, Trust. Access at email, com. Subject, updated numbers. Current liquid assets, 2.3 M. Real estate value, $890K. Investment portfolio, 1.7 million. Life insurance, $500K. Total, approximately 5.4 million. Mom's surgeon said recovery is 6 to 8 weeks for her age. She's been asking questions about the last withdrawal. David might be getting suspicious. We need to move the timeline up. Call me tonight. The draft had never been sent, but the fact that it existed, that Melissa had composed it, had typed those words, made something inside me snap. I stood up from the desk so fast my chair toppled backward. They'd been planning this, planning something around my death, around my recovery, around the exact moment when I was most vulnerable. My own children. I walked through my house like I was seeing it for the first time. The photos on the walls, birthday parties, graduations, weddings, all those moments I'd thought were real. The built memories, the love I'd felt radiating from their smiles. Had any of it been real, or had I been so desperate to be loved, so desperate to matter, that I'd convinced myself I saw something that was never there? I stopped in front of a family portrait from 10 years ago. William was still alive, his arm around my shoulders. The kids were younger, brighter. Melissa was 30, Trevor 28, Natalie 22. We'd taken it at Trevor's wedding, all of us dressed up and happy. William was looking at me in that photo, not at the camera, looking at me with such love, such certainty. "What do I do?" I whispered to his image. "Bill, what do I do?" But he couldn't answer, and I was alone. Except I wasn't, was I? I had David. I had evidence, I had the truth, and I had something else, something my children had clearly underestimated. I had time. They thought I was fragile, recovering, distracted by pain and medication. They thought I'd approve Melissa's request without question, like I'd approved all the others. They thought I was still the mother who loved blindly, who gave without asking, who believed every word they said. But that mother had died somewhere between the recovery room and this moment. And the woman standing here now, the woman with a 6-inch scar and a shattered heart, she was someone different. Someone harder. Someone who was going to find out exactly what her children had planned. I picked up my phone and called David. "How long would it take?" I said when he answered, "to get detailed financial records on all 3 of my children. Bank accounts, credit cards, property purchases, everything." He was quiet for a moment. "Janet, that's invasive. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I need to know what they've been doing with the money they stole from me. I need to know what they're planning. Can you do it? It's not entirely legal without their consent, but there are ways. Private investigators, public records searches. It'll take about a week." "Do it," I said. "Whatever it costs. And David, don't tell anyone, not your secretary, not your partner, no one. You think they're monitoring? I think they've thought of everything," I said. "Except this. They didn't think I'd fight back." After I hung up, I walked back to my bedroom and stood in front of the mirror again. The woman looking back at me still looked tired, still looked wounded, but her eyes were different now. They were awake. The week that followed was the longest of my life, longer than the week William was in the hospital before he died, longer than the week I waited for my biopsy results last year. Because this time, I wasn't waiting to find out if something was wrong. I was waiting to find out how wrong it was. I kept my routine exactly the same. I answered texts from my children with the same tone I always used. When Natalie sent a meme about mothers and daughters, I sent back a heart emoji. When Trevor asked if I needed anything from the store, I said no thank you, just like always. When Melissa called on Thursday, her voice syrupy with concern, I told her I was healing well, and yes, David had received her request, and we'd have an answer soon. "Thanks, Mom," she'd said. "You're literally saving Connor's life. I don't know what we'd do without you." I'd hung up and vomited into the kitchen sink, but I didn't break. I didn't confront. I waited. On Thursday afternoon, a package arrived by courier. No return address. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note from David. "Reviewed everything myself. We need to talk. Come to my house, not the office. Friday, 7 p.m. Bring no one." The tone made my skin prickle. Friday evening, I took another Uber to David's home in the suburbs, a modest colonial where he lived with his wife, Anne. She met me at the door, her face grave. "Janet, honey, come in. David's in his study." She led me through the house to a wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves. David sat at his desk, his face haggard. He looked like he'd aged 5 years and 5 days. "Close the door," he said. Anne did, then left us alone. David gestured to a chair. "Sit down, please." I sat, my hands gripping my purse so tightly my knuckles went white. He plugged the USB drive into his computer and turned the screen toward me. "The investigator I hired is former FBI, discreet, thorough. What he found—" He paused, rubbing his temples. "Janet, I've been a lawyer for 34 years. I've seen families fight over money before. But this is different." "Just tell me," I said. He clicked open a folder. Bank statements filled the screen. "Your daughter Melissa and her husband Paul have been living well beyond their means for 3 years. They purchased a vacation home in the Poconos 18 months ago, $340,000, mostly financed. They leased 2 luxury cars. Their credit card statements show regular dining at expensive restaurants, designer clothes, travel to Europe twice in the past year. Paul's contracting business is failing. He's defaulted on 2 business loans. They're drowning in debt." He clicked to another folder. "Trevor's landscaping company is barely solvent. He expanded too quickly, took on debt he couldn't service. He's 3 months behind on his mortgage. His wife, Kelly, has been visiting a divorce attorney. She filed preliminary paperwork last month. If they divorce, she gets half of everything, including any inheritance he receives." Another folder. "Natalie got remarried 6 months ago. You didn't know?" My breath caught. "What?" "His name is Derek Patterson. He's 48, twice divorced, and has a gambling problem. He's been banned from 3 casinos in Atlantic City. Natalie's bank account shows regular transfers to offshore betting sites. She's depleted her savings. 2 months ago, she took out a $50,000 personal loan at 18% interest." The room spun slightly. I gripped the armrests of my chair. "The money you gave them," David continued, his voice gentle but firm, "didn't go to medical bills or emergencies. It went to maintaining lifestyles they can't afford, to covering debts, to feeding addictions." "All of them?" I whispered. "All 3. And Janet." He clicked to another file. "They've been coordinating. The investigator found a shared Google document titled Estate Planning. They've been tracking your assets for at least 2 years. Every property you own, every investment, every insurance policy. They've calculated it down to the dollar." He turned the screen fully toward me. I saw a spreadsheet, clinical, detailed, horrifying. My entire life reduced to line items, but what made my blood turn to ice was the final tab. It was labeled Timeline. David clicked it open. There were dates, projections, notes. Mom's surgery, April 15th. Recovery, 6 to 8 weeks. Complication risk, moderate to high given age. Estate distribution upon death, equal 3-way split. Liquid assets available immediately. Real estate sales, 3 to 6 months. Total inheritance per person, estimated 1.8 diem. Alternative scenario, early distribution while living. Requires medical necessity documentation or declared incompetence. Higher resistance expected. Timeline, 12 to 18 months. Below that was a note dated 2 weeks before my surgery. If complications arise after surgery, natural timeline accelerates. All positioned to move quickly. Have discussed minimal hospice scenario. M to handle logistics. T to manage property access. N to coordinate legal requirements. I couldn't breathe. The words swam in front of me. Minimal hospice scenario. My children had planned for my death, had discussed how to handle my death, had positioned themselves to move quickly when I died. And the timing of this document, right before my surgery, suggested something even darker. Did they? I couldn't finish the sentence. David understood. The investigator looked into that. Your surgeon's office, the hospital. There's no evidence of tampering or interference. But Janet, they were preparing for you not to wake up, or to have complications serious enough that you couldn't resist their plans. They wanted me to die, I said. The words came out flat, emotionless, because if I let myself feel what those words meant, I would shatter completely, or at minimum, to be incapacitated enough that they could have you declared incompetent and take control of the estate. I stood up abruptly and walked to the window. David's backyard was dark, but I could see lights from neighboring houses. Families inside, having dinner, watching TV, living normal lives where children loved their parents. "There's more," David said quietly. I almost laughed. "More?" "They're planning something for next month. The document mentions a family meeting scheduled for May 20th, all three of them, plus their spouses. The agenda listed is Final Discussion re. Mom's Care and Estate Distribution. Janet, I think they're planning to confront you, to pressure you into signing over assets or restructuring the trust to give them immediate access." I turned back to face him. "When is that?" 3 weeks from now." 3 weeks. They'd given me 3 weeks before they sprang whatever trap they'd prepared. "What can I do?" I asked. "Legally, what are my options?" David leaned back in his chair. "You can revoke their access to the trust. You can restructure your will. You can prosecute them for fraud. We have evidence of forged documents. But Janet," he met my eyes, "if you do any of that, there's no coming back. The family will be destroyed." "The family is already destroyed," I said. "I'm just the last one to know it." He nodded slowly. "Then we fight back, but carefully, strategically. If they think you're onto them, they might escalate. They might try to have you declared mentally incompetent, claim you're paranoid, delusional, with the right doctors, the right lawyers. They could make a case." "So what do I do?" David pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "First, we secure everything. Tomorrow, we'll revoke all their access to your accounts, your calendar, your financial information. We'll do it quietly, make it look like a routine security update. Second, we'll deny Melissa's current request. We'll cite the need for additional documentation, buy ourselves time. Third, we'll prepare a new will, one that removes them as beneficiaries unless certain conditions are met. And fourth," he looked up at me, "we'll let them walk into their own trap." "The family meeting," I said. "Exactly. Let them think everything is normal. Let them have their meeting. But we'll control what happens there. We'll have evidence, witnesses, legal documentation. And when they make their move, we'll be ready." I sat back down, my mind racing. "They'll hate me. They already see you as an obstacle to money they think they're entitled to," David said gently. "This just makes it explicit." He was right. In their minds, I was already gone. Already a problem to be solved. A number on a spreadsheet. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it. All of it." David nodded and continued writing. We spent the next hour planning every detail. What I'd say, how I'd act, the evidence we'd gather, the way we'd choreograph the confrontation. By the time I left his house at 9 o'clock, I had a plan. And I had something else too. A cold, hard certainty that had settled in my chest where my heart used to be. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange haze. I went through the motions of recovery, of normal life. I attended physical therapy for my surgery. I had lunch with my friend Barbara, who chattered about her grandchildren's latest accomplishments while I smiled and nodded. I planted flowers in the garden William had built for me, pressing bulbs into the earth and wondering if I'd be here to see them bloom. And I played my role perfectly. When Melissa called to ask about the inheritance request, I told her David was still processing paperwork. "You know how thorough he is," I said with a little laugh. "But don't worry, sweetheart. We'll get Connor the help he needs." "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." The lie came so easily to her, as easily as breathing. Trevor texted asking if I'd thought any more about estate planning. Kelly and I were talking, and we think maybe it makes sense to simplify things while you're still here. Make it easier for everyone later. I responded, "That's thoughtful. Let's talk about it at the family dinner next month." Natalie sent flowers with a card that read, "Thinking of you always. Love, Natalie and Derek." Derek. The husband I'd never met. The husband she'd kept secret. I put the flowers in a vase and watched them slowly die. David worked behind the scenes. He revoked all access to my accounts, citing a security breach at the bank. He filed paperwork for a new will. He hired a court reporter to attend the family meeting, disguised as a notary for routine estate documents I'd need to sign. He even arranged for a backup witness, his partner James, who'd wait in another room in case things got dangerous. Dangerous? I'd asked. People do desperate things when money is involved, David had said. Especially when they've already crossed so many lines. 3 days before the meeting, I did something I'd been putting off. I drove to the cemetery where William was buried. It was a sunny morning, unseasonably warm. The grass was bright green, dotted with dandelions. I brought fresh flowers, lilies his favorite, and sat on the bench beside his headstone. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, I said to the engraved letters of his name. You always said family was everything, that we stick together no matter what. But Bill, they were planning for me to die. Our children, the babies we raised and loved and sacrificed for, they wanted me gone. A breeze rustled through the trees. I can't let them win, I continued. I can't reward them for this, but I also can't stop being their mother. Even now, even after everything. Part of me wants to believe there's an explanation, that maybe I'm wrong, that maybe... My voice broke. I sat there in silence, crying for the family I'd thought I had, for the mother I'd been, for the future I'd imagined where my children gathered at this cemetery someday and told stories about me with love in their voices. That future was gone. When I finally stood to leave, I placed my hand on William's headstone. I hope you understand, I whispered. I hope wherever you are, you know I tried. I loved them the best way I knew how. The stone was warm beneath my palm, solid, real. I walked back to my car and didn't look back. May 20th arrived with thunderclouds on the horizon. Perfect, I thought. Let there be storms. The family meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock at my house. David arrived at noon with James and the court reporter, an efficient woman named Patricia, who set up a small recording device in a vase on the dining room sideboard. It's voice-activated, she explained. Every word will be documented and legally admissible. David laid out documents on the dining room table. The real estate trust paperwork, account statements, the forged medical bills, the spreadsheet his investigator had found. When do we show them? I asked. Not immediately, David said. Let them make their pitch. Let them reveal their intentions. The more they say, the stronger our case. At 1:55, cars started pulling into my driveway. Melissa arrived first with Paul. She was dressed beautifully, a cream blouse, tailored pants, her hair perfectly styled. Paul wore a suit. They looked like they were attending a business meeting. Because they were. Trevor came next with Kelly. She looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting around. Trevor was jovial, loud, hugging me tight. Hey, Mom, looking good. Surgery treated you well. Natalie and Derek were last. Derek was exactly what I'd expected. Slick smile, firm handshake, the kind of man who assessed everything for its value. Natalie clung to his arm, nervous energy radiating off her. I served coffee and cookies, playing the gracious hostess. We made small talk. Weather, Connor's baseball season, Trevor's latest landscaping contracts. Normal family conversation, almost pleasant. Then Melissa cleared her throat. Mom, we wanted to talk to you about something important. That's why we asked everyone to come today. Here it was. Of course, honey, I said, folding my hands in my lap. What's on your mind? She exchanged glances with Trevor and Natalie. Some silent communication passed between them. We've been talking, Melissa began, and we're worried about you. Living here alone, managing everything by yourself, especially after surgery. It's too much for someone your age. I'm managing fine, I said calmly. But what about next time? Trevor jumped in. What if something else happens? What if you fall and no one's here? Mom, we love you. We want you safe. Natalie nodded vigorously. We've been researching really nice assisted living communities. Places where you'd have help, where you wouldn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning or... I'm 65, I interrupted. Not 90. I don't need assisted living. It's not about need, Paul said smoothly. It's about planning ahead. Being smart. I looked at him, this man who'd married my daughter, who'd smiled at my table 100 times, who was drowning in debt, and saw me as a solution. And my house? I asked. Melissa jumped back in. Well, that's the thing. This house is way too big for one person. If you sold it, you could use that money for your care. Live comfortably without worrying about maintenance and property taxes and the money from the sale? I asked. Where would that go? Silence. Trevor cleared his throat. Into your trust, obviously. But Mom, here's what we've been thinking. It doesn't make sense for all your assets to be locked up until later. You should be able to enjoy your money now. And honestly, it would help us to know we're financially secure too. We could help you better if we weren't so stressed about our own situations. There it was. The truth, dressed up as concern. So you want me to sell my home, I said slowly, move into assisted living I don't need, and distribute my assets to you now instead of after I die. Not distribute, Melissa said quickly. Just restructure. Make it more accessible to everyone. Because you need money, I said. Natalie flinched. Mom, that's not... It's exactly that, I said, my voice hardening. You need money. All three of you. You're drowning in debt, living beyond your means, and you see me, your 65-year-old mother recovering from surgery, as a bank account to raid. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Mom, that's not fair, Trevor said. Isn't it? I stood up and walked to the sideboard. I picked up the first document David had prepared. Let's talk about fair. Let's talk about the $127,000 you've stolen from me over the past 8 years through fake medical bills and fabricated emergencies. I threw the papers on the table. Melissa went pale. What are you? Dr. Patricia Hendricks doesn't exist, I said. There was no warehouse fire. Natalie's divorce was finalized 6 months before she claimed to need legal fees. Every single hardship withdrawal was a lie. Every single one. Mom, you don't understand, Trevor started. I understand perfectly, I said. I pulled out the printed spreadsheet, their spreadsheet, and threw it down too. I understand that you've been tracking my assets for years. I understand that you discussed minimal hospice scenarios before my surgery. I understand that you scheduled this meeting to pressure me into giving you my money while I'm still alive because you're too impatient to wait for me to die naturally. The silence was deafening. Then Derek laughed. Actually laughed. Well, this got awkward. Natalie elbowed him, tears streaming down her face. Mom, please, it's not like that. What's it like then? I asked. Explain it to me. Make me understand how my own children could look at me and see nothing but dollar signs. You have so much, Melissa burst out suddenly, her composure cracking. You have millions just sitting there while we're struggling. While Paul's business is failing and we might lose our house. You could help us. You should help us. We're your children. And you're my mother, Trevor added, standing up. You're supposed to take care of us. That's what parents do. I stared at them. These strangers wearing my children's faces. I did take care of you, I said quietly. I gave you everything. College education's debt-free. Down payments on houses, business loans, money every time you asked. I gave you my whole heart. And you... My voice broke. You made a spreadsheet calculating how much my death was worth. Kelly suddenly spoke up, her voice shaking. I didn't know about any of this. Trevor, you told me... Shut up, Kelly, Trevor snapped. She flinched and stood up. No, I'm done. This is sick. She looked at me. I'm sorry, Janet. I didn't know. Then she walked out. Paul looked at Melissa. We should go. We're not done, Melissa said through gritted teeth. Yes, I said firmly. We are. David? David stepped out from the kitchen where he'd been waiting. James followed. The court reporter emerged from the hallway. My children's faces went from angry to shocked to terrified in rapid succession. Everything said here today has been recorded and witnessed, David said. Janet has evidence of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. She has grounds to prosecute all three of you criminally. You can't do this, Melissa whispered. I can, I said. And unless you leave right now and never contact me again with demands or schemes or lies, I will. Derek grabbed Natalie's arm. Come on, this crazy bitch isn't worth it. Call me that again, I said coldly, and I'll make sure every casino in America knows about your gambling debts and fake identities. He paled. They knew. David's investigator had found everything. One by one, they left, Natalie sobbing, Trevor silent and furious. Melissa pausing at the door to look back at me with such hatred in her eyes that I barely recognized her. You'll regret this, she said. I already do, I replied. I regret believing you were the children I raised. I regret every sacrifice I made, but I don't regret this moment. The door slammed behind them, and I stood in my empty dining room, surrounded by evidence of my children's betrayal, and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief.